President Joe Biden, now in the final phase of his life, has had several significant conversion experiences recently. We cannot quite call them deathbed conversions, but close enough. For one, in the last few years, he discovered a belief in gender fluidity. Though for 7 decades or so, he operated under the firm assumption that men are male and women are female, he now believes that menstruation and pregnancy should not preclude a person from being considered a man. This is, needless to say, a seismic ideological shift, perhaps the most massive flip-flop in political history, really, and yet he's never been asked to explain it. In a change nearly as dramatic, Biden has also decided lately that America is systemically racist. Now, it's possible that he always believed this, but he certainly didn't talk about it nearly as much back then as he does now. The privileged white male Biden has been in the system himself, has been one of the guys running the system, actually, for these past 4 or 5 decades. Then he entered the 2020 primaries, even though there were several women and people of color already in the contest. By winning the primaries, he intentionally prevented all of those marginalized people from having their shot at the presidency. He did all of this while believing that America is a systemically racist hellhole where white supremacists prowl the streets and black people are regularly murdered by law enforcement simply for existing. Or else he only arrived at that conclusion after he'd already knocked out all of his minority competitors. Whatever the case, it's clear that Biden has undergone a remarkable evolution at this late stage of his life, or at least is pretending that he has. And this evolution continued on Tuesday when Biden visited Tulsa, Oklahoma to commemorate the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. During his prepared remarks, Biden took time to bravely denounce the KKK. Takes a lot of courage these days to come out against the KKK, but he did. Now, it's interesting to note that he didn't say any of what you're about to hear when he was delivering the eulogy for his good friend Senator Robert Byrd, who was a former Klan member and organizer. Didn't say that then, but he says it now. Here it is.
If my memory is correct, there were 37 members of the House of Representatives who were open members of the Klan. There were 5, if I'm not mistaken, could have been 7, I think it was 5 members of the United States Senate, open members of the Klan. Multiple governors who were open members of the Klan. Most people didn't realize that a century ago the Klan was founded just 6 years before the horrific destruction here in Tulsa. And one of the reasons why it was founded was because of guys like me who are Catholic. It wasn't about African Americans then. It was about making sure that all those Polish and Irish and Italian and Eastern European Catholics who came to the United States after World War I would not pollute Christianity. The flames from those burning crosses torched every region of the country. Millions of white Americans belonged to the Klan, and they weren't even embarrassed by it. They were proud of it.
Were there people in the audience shouting "preach" during? Did I hear that correctly? It's an odd time. Yeah, there were 5 senators who were in the Klan. Preach! Amen. What? Now, to further prove his wokeness, Biden also invented his own demeaning racial stereotypes and announced them as fact. You hear this a lot from people on the left. They come up with stereotypes that I didn't even know existed. For example, did you know that black business owners don't have accountants? No, I didn't either, but that's what Biden claimed. Let's listen.
The data shows young black entrepreneurs are just as capable of succeeding given the chance as white entrepreneurs are. But they don't have lawyers, they don't have accountants, but they have great ideas. Does anyone doubt this whole nation would be better off from the investments those people make? And I promise you, that's why I set up this National Small Business Administration that's much broader, because they're going to get those loans.
I had what? Black business owners don't have lawyers or accountants? Where are you getting that from? But all this clumsy pandering, I think, really pales in comparison to the claim that Biden made at another point in the speech about the current threats posed by white supremacists. Listen to this.
As I said in my address to the joint session of Congress, according to the intelligence community, terrorism from white supremacy is the most lethal threat to the homeland today. Not ISIS, not Al-Qaeda, white supremacists.
Some more oddly timed, we'll get to that claim in a second, but why are you applauding? Yeah, terrorism for white supremacy is a lethal threat. Yep. Why is that an applause line? I don't quite understand it. Well, I'm being facetious. I do know why people would applaud that, because that's what people want to believe. The most lethal threat to the homeland. Now, notice he doesn't say the most lethal terror threat. There's no qualification. He says it's the most lethal threat, period. He is correct, at least, that we have heard similar claims from the, quote, intelligence community, and certainly his fellow Democrats and backers in the media echo this line or something close to it. White supremacy is the boogeyman, or Bigfoot. It's the monster that we're constantly warned about, though we rarely actually see. We're told that white supremacists are lurking out there, not just a threat, but the greatest threat we face. Yet each day passes by, and all of the violence that the day brings with it has nothing to do with white supremacy. Indeed, the majority of violent crime in this country isn't carried out by white people at all, let alone white supremacists. White people are vastly underrepresented in the category of violent crime, especially among murderers. If white supremacists are the greatest threat, where are they? And what are they doing? Not much, it seems like. Violence plagues our cities, most of it carried out by people who are not white, and therefore presumably not white supremacists. Even the scourge of anti-Asian violence that we hear so much about is predominantly an epidemic of racial minorities targeting another racial minority. I mean, you've seen the videos, maybe. It's not a coincidence. Almost every single video we've seen of an Asian person being randomly assaulted in the street, it is a non-white person carrying out the assault. So where are the white supremacists? I mean, just staying on the anti-Asian thing for a second. There's an epidemic of anti-Asian assaults. Whites, there are, according to Biden, there are white supremacists everywhere. They're the greatest threat. Why aren't they doing any of this? Why aren't they responsible for any of it? People are killed every day in this country. Hundreds every week. Most of them in blue cities. Most of them at the hands of racial minorities. Yet white supremacists are the most lethal threat. Something is not adding up here. It's like showing up to the site of a shipwreck and people are drowning all around you, and you declare that the most lethal threat they all face is high cholesterol. The claim doesn't become much more intelligible even if we limit it specifically to terror threats. Biden did not limit it to terror threats, but let's just pretend for a moment that we are talking about terror threats. Black Lives Matter and Antifa inflicted $2 billion of damage to our cities in one summer. Dozens of people were killed, hundreds of businesses and lives destroyed. And the long-term effects have proven even more devastating. Crime has spiked across the country as police leave the force, departments are defunded, all because of the threats made and carried out by black supremacist radicals and their allies. Black supremacy and left-wing militancy is far and away the greatest domestic terror threat our nation faces. But all of this bloodshed and chaos doesn't count in Joe Biden's estimation because our government has decided not to classify Antifa and BLM as terrorist organizations. It's as simple as that. Well, they're not a terror threat if we don't call them terrorists. They've decided not to even classify their violence as violence most of the time. All of this gets put in the protest folder and then placed in the filing cabinet, and the drawer is shut and locked while SWAT teams are sent to chase down old ladies who trespassed in the Capitol on January 6th. That's how Biden and company are able to look at a country beset by violence and blame it on people who aren't actually committing hardly any of it. They do it by intentionally miscategorizing much of it and ignoring much more of it and simply lying about the rest of it. And they also do it, perhaps most crucially, by broadening the definition of white supremacy so that it's now come to mean all bad things that happen. Now every bad thing is somehow, in some way, the result of white supremacy, even if almost none of it actually is. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.